How's it going, everyone? Welcome to the More Defined podcast. I'm your host, James Chapman Jr., and today we have Jaylon Uzodinma, who I will let share more of who he is and what he does.
Hey everyone, I'm Jaylon Uzodinma, as James stated. I'm currently a graduate student at Georgia Tech studying aerospace engineering as well as business. I'm originally from Madison, Mississippi, lived there my entire life, attended Jackson State University, graduating with a bachelor's in physics in 2020 before starting graduate school at Georgia Tech. And sure we'll get into more about my background and what I do every day.
As I like to start off with every podcast, this is a conversation based. So, I'm asking you questions, but you can definitely ask me questions as well. I can start off with just a check in, just how I see everything is going, 1 to 10, and I can share a little bit about myself and everything too.
Okay. Do you want me to start or you want to go?
You can start.
Okay. So yeah, in terms of just how everything is going right now, I would say pretty well. I'm excited to just kind of get into the summer. School year is generally pretty grueling, even though I am taking a few business classes this summer, night classes, which I haven't done since my freshman year at Jackson State. It's a little bit awkward when you like work the entire day on other stuff and then have to go sit at like a 3 hour lecture at night. But I think kind of outside of school and just professionally, I have a lot going on. I'm getting married next year. So it's always a lot of like wedding planning, a lot of discussions just with my fiance and things of that sort. So doing my best to balance kind of like the professional life and education as well as kind of my personal life. How about yourself?
Congratulations again on getting married and
Thank you.
everything. Um,
Thank you.
I say for me, everything's going pretty well. Just to give it a number, I'd say like a 8.5. At this point, everything's kind of in line for how I want it to be. I'm in a groove with work and everything, and my personal life is coming up to par for how I want it to be as well. And me doing this podcast now is something that I've been wanting to get back into for a while, and the fact that I'm back into it full time now is pretty big for me. So everything's going pretty well.
See, and I guess how do you structure your time? Like between, I imagine that I'm not sure everything about your work schedule, but you mentioned that you also want to kind of get back on the podcast as well. So like, how do you structure your time each week?
So at this point now, it's kind of fluctuated month to month basically. But
Mhm.
since I graduated last May, but up to this point now, basically how my mind and how my schedule is set up is like I have work. Um, what is it, 9? Yeah, I do a 980 schedule basically, and so it's like 9 hours a day for like those 80 hours for those 2 weeks. And so that's Monday through Friday. So for every other Friday, I'm off. But when I'm not at work, I dedicate time pretty much Monday through Friday to go to the gym, and then like that rest of the time until like 10:30 ish at night, I try to maybe do something with my podcast or maybe read a book, or I might just partake in like a movie or something or watch a sporting event or anything. But with the podcast now, it's been more of planning around that, and so depending on if I did everything I need to do editing wise, like on a Monday or Tuesday, then like the rest of the week I can kind of relax or whatnot. But if I have other things to do in terms of like editing or trying to set up an interview or something, then that's like my focus for that time period. But usually by the time the weekend gets here, I'm relaxing, hanging out with family or friends. So it's just a matter of what I get done at the beginning of the week, basically.
I see. And it's really cool that you have so much to do as well as like structure applied to it to make
Yeah.
sure you're able to tackle everything. I wish I was a little bit more structured, but always work in progress.
Oh yeah. Like I said, it's fluctuated. Like in the beginning, after I graduated, because I took some time off before I actually started working. I was
Mhm.
kind of doing nothing or whatnot. Then started work, and I had to figure out all that whirlwind and get everything together. And now at this point, since it's been a good year, I've got it completely structured how I want it, basically, and can take this out of the calendar if I want to put something in or whatnot. So it's been interesting to say the least, but I'm getting to the good groove over now.
That's good to hear.
All right, so this is something that I ask all of my guests. At
Mhm.
what point did you know, or did someone tell you that you had the gift for engineering?
Hmm. be honest, I think me going into engineering probably goes back to when I was like 8 or 9.
Mm,
It was the first time when I really became interested in airplanes. And growing up, I always kind of had an obsession with speed. And it's like,
mm,
okay, you could be in a car, then you have like sports cars that go very fast, and it's like, okay, what's
yeah.
faster than that? Airplanes. So I can vividly remember being in like the third grade, and there was this book when we'd have like private reading time. There was a book that was in like our classroom like library. It was called like How Things Work, and it was basically a
Mm,
book that would show you all of these different like complex machines and mainly show you like the parts of the machines, how they work, and all of that good stuff. And I just stumbled on a page that was showing like an airplane and all different parts of an airplane, and I just started drawing airplanes back then. I
mm,
was going on the internet learning as much as I could about airplanes that like my elementary school brain could comprehend. Like I don't really
yeah.
have a lot of math or physics background at this point, but I really became very obsessed with airplanes, especially like military airplanes,
Mm,
just because those were like the most advanced when you think of like aircraft performance.
oh
And
yeah. Yeah.
used to watch the military channel a lot, kind of with that, and that stuck with me. So I would say I wanted to be an aerospace engineer, specifically an aeronautical engineer, which basically there's two sides of aerospace, astronautics and
Mm-hmm.
aeronautics. Aeronautics just being like flight within our atmosphere. That goes back to when I was 8. And in terms of just a gift for engineering, um, I think I've always kind of been interested in like math or any kind of like physics, just figuring things out. So I think that definitely um, is also kind of goes back to that time period. I think I remember always doing well in math courses.
Mm,
I do have a weird memory. I think it was fifth grade, fourth or fifth grade, uh, where I think the school counselor and my math teacher recommended that I go represent the school at like some engineering camp at Mississippi State that I
oh.
ended up not going to because at that age I'm like, I don't, why am I leaving home? Like, why
Oh
am I going to
man.
give up my summer? But that was like an engineering camp, and it was basically like, you perform well in math. This will probably be
Mm-hmm.
interesting or good for you. So I would think all I've ever wanted to be was an engineer, to be quite honest with you, career
Yeah.
wise. What about you?
It's funny how you mentioned the kind of general love for the physics part because I hate physics actually, but
I do.
I would say for me it's kind of the same thing that you were saying. Just had that general interest in it and that curiosity for anything science and math related since I've been a kid. Um,
Mhm.
I don't know if I had any like a pinpoint moment besides just like having little things that I've learned now. It's like, okay, this was science related, or like that was a little bit math related as I got older. But I always loved math too. I remember being in second grade and third grade at the elementary school I went to, and we had different like little things that we did throughout the day, and one of those would be like math. What they call them? It's not like a quiz, but they do like math challenges a little bit, and so we would
Mhm.
like it'd be like a class competition basically, and so we do little timetable things or adding up different stuff, and it was always something that made me want to be really competitive, and so I always knew that math was definitely big for me then. But to lock down a certain moment for engineering, I would say middle school, um, when I joined TSA, Technology Student Association, and
Cool.
not that seventh grade year, but the eighth grade year, I actually joined the robotics team that we had at our
Mm.
school. And so that was kind of the moment that really sparked engineering for me. And then I got into high school and then solidified basically what I thought I kind of wanted to get into, which led me to choosing chemical engineering by the time I got to Mississippi State. So, yeah.
It's a really, really cool path. Everything from the TSA to the robotics team. I wasn't part of any of that stuff in school. It was cool
Yeah.
to hear someone that actually like got involved in school that young.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I was always interested in trying to be a part of any and every organizations that they had at school.
Mhm.
But like TSA was a big one because I went to the national conference they had that year too, and that just like opened my mind. I was like, okay, like there's an actual path for me here to like get into
Right.
engineering and do stuff that I want to do, STEM related wise, and so that was the gateway for me basically.
And that's all really cool. I guess learning some of these stories now and like growing up in the same church, sometimes you're not
Yeah.
always aware of what everybody's doing.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, like Fair Street, we're a very, very like close knit church. I feel like we're, a lot of the kids that grow up, maybe a lot of us move away. But I feel like, like we know each other, but it's like
Yeah.
interesting hearing stories like this where it's like, I did not know this
Yeah.
about James, and that's kind of the path that he took and things of that sort. So really cool to hear now, especially.
Speaking more on the childhood thing, try to see how I word this question because you spoke about it a
Mhm.
good bit. Maybe just any other things that you can think of, like elements that kind of like just led you to that love for STEM. Um,
Hmm. Think any other elements that led me to. I think something you touched on or put a word on, like kind of like the curiosity. Something that my mom talks a lot about to like other people is me being very, very young, like as young as maybe 4 or even 3, and always asking like why or that doesn't make
mm,
sense,
yeah,
and
yeah,
just kind of always wanting to know like, okay, how is this connected to that? There was, I think I was maybe 3. Um, there was some really bad weather that came through our subdivision, um, and there was a tornado that was on the ground for a particular number of minutes, but it kind of destroyed the back of our neighborhood, and we ended, of course, losing power, losing electricity. And my mom always speaks of this story of me, opening the refrigerator, and of course, I'm not seeing like the light come on,
yeah.
and just being so confused. And at this point, I've only been, walking for a little bit, but obviously, I was going to the refrigerator and getting things myself, and just bothering my parents, like, why is it not working? I'm using very simple sentences, like,
Mm,
she just quoted like, refrigerator doesn't work or it's not working, and
yeah.
her saying it's because of the tornado, and me just like, well, what does a tornado have to do with the refrigerator
Yeah.
not working? And me not being accepting of that type of explanation unless you tell me, okay, explain to me that the tornado knocked down power lines and that the power lines are
Mhm.
how we get electricity to the house,
Mhm.
and that is what the
Yeah.
refrigerator is running off of. So I think that's kind of always been in me, but I definitely think it's one of those things where I think you do have to kind of foster it as a kid, because I've
Yeah.
done everything like mentorship in college and stuff. You see so many kids that are incredibly gifted at math and don't realize it, or incredibly
Mhm.
gifted at science and they just don't like feed that passion, or they, tell themselves like, a lot of negative self-talk, and it's like, you're just as smart, if not smarter than I was
Oh
at
yeah.
your age. You just don't realize it. So I think it's definitely cool when you meet people that are able to actually kind of feed that passion to allow it to grow, because I think that's kind of the biggest thing is just when you recognize that you're passionate about something, make sure that you feed that passion and continue to grow it. I have like, of course, a lot of friends, a lot of people I grew up with, and being someone that knew what I was passionate about and stayed there from a very young age.
Mm,
I've always had people that looked at me as kind of odd because, they hit 22, maybe 25, 24, and I really don't know what I'm passionate about. I really
yeah.
don't know, maybe I went to college and majored in something, but I really wasn't that interested in it. Um, and I'm just like, I think everybody knows what they're passionate about. It's just a matter of you accept it or not.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so think about the things you do when you're not being encouraged to do it, or no one's forcing you to do it. And that's generally kind of, maybe for some people it's easier to accept than others. But I think we all have different talents, different gifts, and it's just a matter of accepting whatever it is that you're truly passionate about. So I think that's probably just kind of the curiosity thing I would go back to as a kid, and then just feeding it after that.
Yeah. The thing you said about when you're that young and somebody fostering that within you and just positively speaking to you about it, that's a big deal because that was one of my main goals in high school and in college too, with the organizations that I was in, especially with
Mhm.
when I joined Nesby and Mississippi State and trying to
Mhm.
do anything and everything that we could with the youth. It was like being able to reach back down to them and tell them like, hey, like it's possible to do any and everything STEM related. And like you said, a lot of these kids now they're way smarter than we were. So
Yeah, a
they
lot.
just need somebody to help guide them basically. So
Definitely. I actually, so I was not involved. My first time going to a NSB conference was last year in
oh
Kansas
well.
City. And yeah, I always knew NSB existed. I always heard about it. I wasn't part of it in undergrad. Uh, got to grad school, was just kind of stuck in my lab and just working and stuff like that. Ended up getting an opportunity to go to Kansas City for the NSB conference, and that was just a super amazing, eye-opening experience. And this past year was actually in Atlanta, so I didn't need to
Mm-hmm.
travel. But the dean of engineering here wanted like essentially every student here that's
Oh
like
wow.
black
Yeah,
or
yeah. Mm-hmm.
even an ally to just go. Like there's no excuse. If it's right across the street, there's no
Mm-hmm.
excuse not to go. And even when you kind of see the Nesby Junior, right, like the younger kids that might be from the Atlanta area or even other areas, I'm just like super impressed. And I'm just like, yeah, I was not part of anything like this as a kid. Um, but yeah, I really appreciate Nesby a lot.
Yeah, Nesby. I did a summer program going into state, and that was the
Hmm.
summer bridge program, which is part of the LSAMPs. And so they're
Hmm.
connected through a lot of Nesby and other organizations and stuff. And so that's how I got into Nesby because some of my mentors at that summer program, they were a part of Nesby and everything. And so I went to a national conference my freshman year actually, and like walking through the conference building and everything, and going to the career fair there and stuff, and just seeing the amount of black engineers like blew my mind. And I was like, man, like this is definitely something I need to put more time into and make sure I'm doing
Hmm.
everything in my power to benefit everything that Nisby has to offer. So,
Should we also state, I'm not sure if everybody in the audience knows exactly what NSB stands for, National Society of Black
uh,
Engineers.
yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah. It's actually good. I should have did that myself, but
You good.
I was a part of another organization too, NOBISHE, the National Organization for Black Chemists and Chemical Engineers. And
Hmm.
so, being a part of those organizations, they definitely have shifted my mindset even more towards trying to connect back to the youth and being able to be that best example that I can be when it comes to bringing more and more of us to STEM and helping us actually thrive in STEM too.
Oh yeah, definitely.
All right, do you think that coming from Mississippi gives you a unique perspective on the opportunities that the engineering world provides?
Hmm. Unique perspective on the opportunities in engineering. So I would say this. Okay, growing up in Mississippi and then doing undergrad in Mississippi, it's like, you travel, maybe you're here and there for a conference outside, but it hasn't been
Mm,
since until I really came to graduate school at an institution outside of Mississippi where I really kind of understood what it means to be from
mm,
Mississippi and to kind of like, when you meet someone, okay, they get your name, they hear your undergraduate institution and they hear like the state that you're from or the city that you're from, but they don't really know the city. So you don't
yeah.
really just talk about this state. And that's been the time where it's like really me identifying as a Mississippian. It's
Mm,
like, in Mississippi, everybody's here, right? So it's like I'm not really labeled by the state until I'm outside of the state. And it's been super, super interesting kind of seeing people's perceptions of Mississippi. And to be just frank, like the negative perceptions of
mm, yep. Yep.
Mississippi, um, whether it's just, what it's like, people assume that everything's like a farm,
Mm-hmm.
um, that we don't have access to, even something as simple as like I heard someone like make some, I guess, assumption that people in Mississippi were not accustomed to seeing like luxury cars or like
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
certain car brands, and it's like, okay, I don't know where you guys think we live, but I would say kind of with that, what it has made me do is kind of recognizing a lot of those perceptions. And okay, what can I do to make sure that I represent the state that I'm from in the most positive light, while also acknowledging that the state does have areas it needs to grow in,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I can't say that these perceptions that maybe people have from the outside, like, if you live in a different state and all you ever seen is a ranking list of education and you see Mississippi at the bottom, or you see a ranking list for obesity and you see Mississippi at the
Mm-hmm.
top. Well, if
Mm-hmm.
that's all you know about the state, then it's like, I can't blame you for maybe, having all those assumptions. But I do think it's especially funny, and I've even joked about this with like classmates. There's nothing funnier than like taking a class here and then everybody knowing that like you're the only Mississippian and it's their perception of Mississippi. And then your grades or your performance in class essentially flipping
Mm.
the scale or what their perception
Mm.
might be. And I'm like, um, yeah, like I'm from Mississippi, but I've also gone to public school my whole life. So it's like maybe your perception isn't quite right. But then they use the argument that you're like an outlier, an anomaly, things of that sort. But it's not to say what. Um, it's not until I moved outside of Mississippi that I really started to realize that it is important that I represent where I'm from to just kind of show people something a little bit different. Um, so yeah. What about yourself?
Actually, speaking about the first time I got a whiff of that was at that Nesby conference my freshman year. And I met different people doing different workshops and everything. And they're like asking, where you're from and everything. I say Mississippi. And they're like, oh, wow. Like, just looking at me and everything and the way I articulated and stuff and how I said I was a chemical engineer, they were just blown away by some of it. And I was like, why do y'all have this made up assumption that we just aren't able to do certain things? But that also made me take a little bit more pride too in the fact that I, like you said, I went to public school all my life, and that I am at an institute in Mississippi that has a good engineering program. And so it was, for me, I've noticed it periodically over time since even after graduating a little bit too. It's like you still kind of have to push that narrative that Mississippi has a lot to offer in a sense, but also that the stuff that we do have here, we have to take more pride in it. And the people who I guess are anomalies in a sense, like even those people, they have to we have to champion them more and be able to
Definitely.
give them more love, give them their flowers more, because it's actually really hard to graduate from an institute here and go off somewhere and perform to the best of your ability or be at the top of a class in a graduate program or something like that. So it's it's been interesting and unique, but I know it's something
Mhm.
we'll kind of have to deal with for the rest of our lives, honestly.
Definitely. It's really crazy thing happened earlier this year. So I'm part of the Black Graduate Student Association
Mm,
here at Georgia Tech, and literally those of us that are on like the executive board, we're planning for this annual event we have called GT Squared, which is
mm,
basically a research symposium that we put on, but it's to highlight the Black students here.
yeah.
And we do like a poster competition, oral presentations, and we also bring speakers. Many of them, we try to bring in speakers that are, alums preferably, but also people that have just done great stuff. And we were looking for, we're brainstorming, maybe like the 7 or 8 of us that are on the e-board, a potential speaker for, we wanted someone to do like an entrepreneur workshop. And also kind of like, we also had, basically we're going to have two keynote sessions. Um, but we're needing to fill this slot, and the name that came to my mind was Nashley Cephas, who's
Mm, mm.
from
Oh yeah,
Jackson,
yeah, yeah.
went to Mississippi State, also went to Georgia Tech, is of course investing back home,
Mm-hmm.
um, still working as an Amazon AI scientist and doing all of what she does. Uh, and I threw out her name, and I remember looking at there was another person on the e-board that was like, "You're talking like Dr. Cephas, Dr. Cephas," and I'm like, "Yeah," like, and they were like, "She's gonna be really tough to get," and I'm like, "Maybe I can leverage the Mississippi connection. I'm gonna reach out to
Yeah.
her," and we ended up pulling her in as a
Mm,
speaker, and that was my first time actually meeting her, and she gave a really excellent talk for our event. But it's another person. You're like, dang, here's a Mississippian doing all this spectacular stuff.
yeah.
Uh, Still reaching back. She lives out here, but talking about, she travels back home, and a lot of her family's still in Mississippi. And also she's working on her project in Jackson, where she's building like this basically hub to expose
Mm-hmm.
people, like a technology hub in
The beam path.
Jackson.
Yep.
Yep. And her just kind of discussing that, also just talking about her life growing up, like high school and in college. And you sort of see that there's Mississippians everywhere. We're just not,
Mm-hmm.
maybe we're not as connected as we should be, but it was really, really cool to kind of reach out to her and to be able to pull her in as a speaker, but to have just kind of that commonality, like, hey, we're both from Mississippi.
Yep.
And I would love to be able to do some of the things that you've done in the future.
Mm-hmm. Definitely someone. When I started following her a couple of years ago, I actually followed her because of somebody else who met her and worked with her. But just seeing that, I was like, yeah, that's inspiring because having a Mississippian go out and do the things that she's doing, but also coming back home as often as she does and investing. back into just building up Jackson and everything is definitely powerful.
Spectacular.
So you attended JSU, as you've mentioned before, for your undergrad.
Yeah.
What was it about attending an HBCU that led you to get your undergraduate degree in physics?
Yes. So growing up, so I mean, I grew up around Jackson State. I've been at Jackson State's campus probably every week of my entire life, maybe the time I was one. I had my very first haircut at Jackson State at the JSU
Mm,
barbershop. Parents went there, a lot of family ties. But ironically, maybe just growing up, it's never really like always just a thought that I would go there for college. I remember getting to maybe like 11th grade and then 12th, where I really started to think more about college. I always kind of had this mentality like, oh, I'll think about it when it comes, right?
yeah,
Like I'll,
yeah.
it'll be here and then I'll make a decision. And I felt myself just kind of in about mid to late high school wanting or craving a black environment.
Mm,
Um, and I would even say it kind of relates to the NESB stuff or Nobuche or Black Graduate Student Associations that it's like sometimes you can find yourself craving these black spaces. And I definitely felt like towards the end of high school, that's something that I needed. And when I started to take a few college visits, I really, really loved the way that my HBCU visits went. And really, really enjoyed my Jackson State visit. And my only other really real requirement for undergrad, just because of the way I am, or really in general, I just wanted to go to college also free. Like it was like,
yeah,
I
yeah.
want a great experience, but also from what I know about college, when people talk about, paying for it, it's like I really, really would love to be able to go to college free. So
Mm,
like, my motivator, if it's like a class in high school or anything else that I'm working on in like extracurricular, it's like, okay, the goal is to get a scholarship. Like the goal is to not put that burden on myself or on my parents. And I had a few like full ride offers and ended up choosing JSU. I never looked back. I absolutely enjoyed my time at Jackson State in terms of majoring in physics. Um, took a physics course like 11th grade. That was really, really, really cool, fun course I took in high school. Um, Enjoyed the subject, enjoyed my classmates, and that was kind of one of the moments I'm like, all right, I know I want to go into engineering, but I mean, this is kind of like the basis behind like all engineering. Um, so I have this free opportunity here. I know I'm going to be going to graduate school anyways, and I think that I have a really good chance to go here, do great things, and continue to grow. And I also think that I tell people this. Had I not gone to Jackson State, if you've seen anything else I've done that you thought was cool or amazing, it would probably not have been possible had I not made that
mm,
decision. And I
mm,
think that decision definitely opened my eyes to a lot of things. Uh, had a lot of great instructors that believed in me, invested a lot in me. Um, Met a lot of great people as well. Pushed myself a lot in my classes. I do think it was pretty clutch to also pretty much be like at home because it really
yeah.
felt like the difference in high school and college for me was okay, in high school you're stuck at school from like 8 to like 3:30, and
Mm,
then if you only have three classes a day in college and they're like 9, 10, and 11, your day is free after
yep,
that. So it's like, and that's
yep.
sort of like it kind of actually felt like a simpler life for me, and I think everything worked out with that. I definitely uh, love that. I mean, growing up in the same church, it was absolutely amazing. To be going to college locally, still be at home, but also to be around my grandmother as much as I was able to
Mm,
be around my grandmother. Um, just in those years of her life, that was something that's something I would never trade. So I think that was just a perfect decision for me, and it definitely set me up well for graduate school. It set me up well for graduate school applications. One of the biggest things for grad school applications is like research experience, and one
yep,
of the blessings
yep.
I had in my physics department was that I was encouraged to get research experience from my freshman year. So, you're applying for graduate school, you're looking for opportunities, and you have people that maybe just started doing research like last summer or last year. And it's like, I've been doing this since I was a freshman. I have multiple different research experiences to talk about. I have my name included on published papers already. I spent every summer going elsewhere, even in the summers working at other institutions, which was like me, pushing myself even beyond just the academic year at Jackson State. But that's also something I was encouraged to do,
Hmm.
right? So um, that's kind of how that decision came about, craving that HBCU experience and then educationally. I do think that no matter where you go, there are some like non-negotiables.
Oh, for
I think
sure.
people sometimes forget about it. It's like no matter where you go, you have to, if you want to be great or you want to reach a certain level, you have to work incredibly hard, and that shouldn't
Mm.
change from one institution to the next. And I've kind of always had that uh, drive to push myself, but it's something you spoke about earlier, kind of that like competitive nature too.
Yeah.
Um, I was telling people, some of my classmates, they were like, like, how did you apply to all these grad schools? How did you get this, get that? And I was like, some people may see that result and not understand that before I ever submitted like a grad school application and did stuff, you've been working years to do
Yeah.
certain things. And it's like,
Oh, yeah.
I was a freshman taking maybe in the second semester in like calculus, something that maybe some of my friends back then would know that like a lot of people that I'm around today don't know is that on YouTube they have like courses. It's like a thing called MIT Open Courseware where they have a lot of whole subjects uploaded. And I used to just watch calculus lectures, like
Mm.
just in private time, just watch lectures. And one of the things that I would do, I'm like, okay, this is MIT lecture. I know there's a certain perception of the students in that classroom. As I'm watching this video, I'm going to see how many times I answer the question before they do. Or I'm
Mm.
going to listen to the questions they ask and think, I know that already. I don't understand why you have that question and things of that sort. And I don't know the people in the classroom, but it's just kind of like, I'm already trying to compete with supposedly the best of the best.
Yeah.
And that was when you get 18 or 19. Um, so, I mean, I think it's kind of just a mixture of all those things, like planning for the future and then just putting your head down and working towards it.
I love that, honestly, especially the last part about the MIT class and actually trying to see if you know those answers. Like that's the stuff that literally would make me go in high school. Honestly, like being able to know that some of the homework we did for AP calculus or whatnot, or
Mhm.
something else, like I got it right, or I knew it a little bit more than somebody else. That also
Yeah.
drove me too once I got to Mississippi State and got a chance to be in those classrooms because obviously the amount of black people in the class that I was taking was obviously a low number, but for
Mhm.
us to be able to like understand what we were doing, that was a big thing for me. But also like sometimes we got some of the stuff right compared to other people asking in the room, so it was a
Yeah.
boost for sure.
Yeah, and with the black spaces thing, so when I was at Jackson State, I didn't necessarily have to look for black spaces because it's like
Yeah, yeah.
everything's a black space. And coming to grad school out here, of course, I came in during the pandemic, so like the
Mm,
whole first year, it's just brutal. It's hybrid. Spending most of my time actually in my apartment, or I mean back home a lot. Or you go to class and maybe it's like 50% capacity. Um, but it wasn't really until like my second year when, things calmed down that I realized that like, okay, I need to get better tapped into kind of the black
mm,
spaces on
mm,
campus because it's not just in your classroom. It's not, uh, coming necessarily from your professors. And that's when I got tapped in with the Black Writer Student Association and started, like I mentioned, even my just last year, first time going to like a NESB conference. And it's like being in a different space now, actually having to kind of identify those things. And eventually, for the first time ever, like I didn't do any leadership in high school or even undergrad, but getting to a point where it's like, okay, I think it's time for me to actually take a
mm,
leadership. Like I see the purpose, see the mission
mm,
here, and I also think there's a lot of value I can bring to the table. And when I believe, even when we hosted the event GT Squared that Dr. Sita spoke at, and we had some other, spectacular speakers as well, and they hold all these big time positions at top companies or their own companies. And you look at their resumes, you're like, oh, these people had to be so spectacular in school. They had to just blow through everything. And you know how many of those people talked about, some of their struggles when they perhaps came here, or how the Black Writers Student Association is the reason that they were able to graduate,
mm.
and just
Yeah,
that
yeah.
community and that support and trying to pull each other through. And it's like, you realize the importance of these spaces, that it's, bigger than just having like a meetup. Um, this is really the difference in graduation or never graduating for a lot of
Yeah,
people.
Yeah.
So,
Do you think that HBCUs do a good job of recruiting for engineering majors?
hmm. HBCUs. So I will say this. HBCU landscape is pretty interesting because, each, as any institution or group of institutions, there are schools that have their different kind of focus areas, their strengths,
Hmm.
things of that sort. I feel like HBCUs are, I can speak on Jackson State. Even though I was not an engineering major at Jackson State, I did ultimately end up taking some engineering classes just as like stuff to do. Um, I think Jackson State, when I was there, I feel like they were pretty involved with JPS, um, and maybe some other surrounding school districts. Uh, I can't necessarily maybe speak so much. I mean, I remember we hosted like a science competition or some speed science competition, things of that sort. So I know that there were definitely opportunities to kind of bring students from Mississippi um, to Jackson State to kind of see what they had to offer. I have visited it's another HBCU that I got to see pretty close into what they do in engineering. It's North Carolina A&T. I would say
Mm.
honestly, as far as HBCUs go, they're probably the strongest
Oh yeah,
in terms of
yeah.
their engineering program overall. And I could definitely see that they were investing a lot. It's kind of what their, it's their bread and butter. It's what they continue to invest in, what they've been good at for a very long time. If there's one thing that I think could be a little different at HBCUs is I don't know if, and make sure I'm saying this in the right way. I I'll say that for all the opportunities that do exist at HBCUs, I'm not always sure that students, especially Black students, are fully aware
Mm.
of the opportunities, especially because I think going to high school and even leaving high school, I'm not so sure that everybody I went to high school with or even surrounding high schools would be fully aware of some of the great opportunities that Jackson State had to offer. And I think, um, some of it might just come down to perceptions in the way that certain institutions and schools are talked about versus others. But I definitely think that I wish that's something that could change kind of uh, locally, but I think also especially within the Black community. I think that HBCUs, especially, I don't think HBCUs are a thing that's like a thing of the past. So these were needed decades ago. I think that they're just as important today as they were many decades ago. And I think that if you look at the numbers and records, like you can actually see that the amount of first generation college students to complete their
Mm.
education at HBCUs, if you look at the number of Black engineers, the number of Black pharmacists, the number of Black anything that come out of HBCUs relative to other institutions, I do think that they are definitely still important. And I think that we can maybe continue to highlight that and just show people the wonderful opportunities that are available. And I'm just basically speaking because I've come across Black students that may have negative perceptions of HBCUs, and
Mm.
that
Mm.
is something that bothers me a little because it's like if you have a negative perception, make sure that it's based or
It's
based on something
factual.
real.
So yeah.
Yeah, not something that you heard or think that you heard or that's not true. Because you might be walking past exceptional opportunities and you don't know. Um, so that's something I think, but I don't know if I'm in a position to necessarily say like, hey, they're not doing enough. I would say in all cases, yeah, you should always improve, always try to be
Mm.
better. Um, but I do think that maybe what I would say probably isn't where it should be. I think the perception is definitely a lot worse than it should be because I I don't know. I mean, I've heard things sometimes and it's like I don't know where that came from. So maybe further investment in branding,
Mm.
and making sure that your brand is always being represented possibly and in defending your brand as well. Uh, that could probably be improved, but I don't know if I'm in a position to necessarily say they're not doing enough in recruitment. But I would say, of course, continue to always expand and show people because there's surely someone missing out that deserves that opportunity.
Honestly, I was one of those kids like growing up. Like
Mm-hmm.
I knew about Jack State, obviously the family ties, the church ties,
Mm-hmm.
and it was interesting too because I don't know how much people did it at church for you, but for me, it was like they were kind of beating me when in the head with the HBCU thing, and I was just so against it honestly because I didn't know about the opportunities in engineering specifically. Because, you know, like you
Mhm.
said, certain schools, their bread and butter is certain type of majors or certain type of career paths. And so
Mhm.
I didn't know about certain ones like the North Carolina A&Ts or like the Gramblings or like the
Yeah.
Howards, like specific engineering majors they're like actually excel at. And if I would have known that then, I would have put in applications for those instead of trying to go basically to all the different PWIs. But the branding aspect and being able to push more of those opportunities that are actually out there is something that I'm been interested in since I was at state, and that's why it's now big for me to try to weave my way into those spaces in the background of like, hey, like going to HBCU is just as good as going to a PWI, and sometimes those opportunities for like how you've had your path, it's probably better at a HBCU. Once you finally do get to that path of getting into graduate school somewhere or being able to go to a career path, so it's something that takes a lot more work that I know
Mhm.
a lot of us, especially people our generation, they're willing to do. But I think it's a matter of kind of like we were saying earlier, just that reach back, that investing back into the community of like, hey, there's plenty of options out here, and you don't have to really focus on just the PWI here or like the local big university here. Like, there's 3 or 4
Mhm.
HBCUs locally or nationally that you can probably go to that'll definitely help you get to where you want to go to.
Definitely. And I'll say this, funny experience I've had since I've been at Georgia Tech, especially with like the BGSA, Black Writers Student Association. We have like this thing we call First Friday. So the first Friday of every month, we go out to some random event. Sometimes it's just food at a restaurant. Other times it might be like bowling, could be any different activity that might be happening locally. And one time we were at a restaurant, and you're meeting with people, you're mixing, and you start to realize just how many people are from HBCUs.
Mm.
And you start saying, okay, so you went to Hampton, you went to Howard, I went to Jackson State, you went to A&T, you went
Mm-hmm.
to A&M, you did, and it's like you start looking and it's like, dang, the majority of our tables actually
Mm.
HBCU alums actually, and just got interested in it. And maybe part of it's by chance that hey, you have a bunch of people that went to HBCU, so naturally when they're in a PWI institution, when they're in a PWI, they're looking for that black space because it's what
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
accustomed to. So on one hand, they're more likely to maybe show up, but I'm looking and I see so much greatness. I'm like, dang, it's some really, really impressive people. And, their stories, their goals are not the things that we necessarily always see in black men and black women. And I will say this, and this is maybe my biggest thing with people on like HBCUs. Of course, go wherever makes you happy. I'm not here
Yeah.
to tell anyone to
Yeah.
do anything that doesn't make them happy. But I think black spaces or black environments do have a very special way of kind of pulling out the best in you. There was nothing I didn't think I could do when I left Jackson State or
Mm.
whatnot. There was nothing that I was afraid of. There was nothing. Now, some of that just might be my personality, but it's like when you're in an environment where your instructors or a lot of your even peers around you, like everybody thinks you're great. And that's been what it's been since you showed up here.
Mm-hmm.
At a certain point, you start to really believe it. Like maybe you're crazy enough to really believe that
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
are so great. And I would say you end up coming across people that have been in those black environments and their confidence is just on a whole nother level. And then maybe I've met people that were from different environments. And maybe it's related to their natural personality, but maybe the environment also impacts it too. Maybe they're also great and you just see them speak about themselves and they don't sound quite as confident. They don't sound like they really believe. And I think that's something that HBCUs definitely excel in. And that was definitely my experience. And I know a lot of other people where it's kind of been their experience. But teach its own, I would always
Mm-hmm.
say. And there's no excuse not to be great, no matter where you go. And there's no excuse not to be great.
How did you land on the pursuit of a PhD? And what was it about Georgia Tech that made you choose them specifically?
Okay. So PhD. So no, I did not grow up when I was 8 becoming interested in aerospace. I was not thinking about a PhD in aerospace. At that point, I was probably thinking of bachelor's, and towards the end of high school, I was thinking, okay, I'll definitely pick up a master's in aerospace because
Mm.
I'm going to be majoring in physics, or even if I do aerospace undergrad, like I know it's probably really good to at least get a master's.
Yeah. Hmm.
So that's probably furthest I was thinking about. I would say that getting involved in research at Jackson State so early in my academic career, of course, all the people you're working with, they have PhDs. And, you start to see kind of this big world of research, what it means to uh, work on your dissertation, what it means to
Hmm.
defend your thesis. And you're just kind of exposed to this really, really new world that you didn't necessarily know existed. And you say, okay, this seems pretty interesting. This is also the opportunity to kind of push the boundaries, right? Like, you can learn what someone else did, or you can actually expand like beyond that and say, I'm actually creating new knowledge, right? I'm creating something that someone else might be able to utilize and leverage. And I think that is what initially got me interested maybe in pursuing a PhD. But to be quite honest with you, I wasn't sure, master's or PhD. So when I actually applied to graduate school, there was a mix. There were some PhD programs and some master's programs. At the institutions where I applied for master's programs, you actually were not allowed to apply direct to PhD from a bachelor's.
Mm. Mm.
So that's even something I found a lot of people didn't know, that people could go directly from a bachelor's to a
Yep.
PhD
Yep.
program, direct from a, straight through. And it's literally just based off if your application is good enough, they'll just go ahead and admit you. It
Hmm.
doesn't mean you don't have to complete requirements along the way,
Yeah.
but you can just go ahead and get that acceptance, and that's really big when it comes to funding. PhD programs are always more likely to be funded than master's programs.
Hmm.
Um, so if you're undecided and you want to make sure it's funded, definitely go for the PhD. That I will tell anybody. But I've always had a passion for aircraft design. Georgia Tech, and the lab that I'm in here is called the Aerospace Systems Design Laboratory. It's the biggest lab of its kind in the world.
Mm.
Um, my advisor has more publications than anybody in the world of aircraft design. Uh, so, this is really where they just make it happen. I will say, kind of differentiating the program here from maybe some of the other programs that exist. I do have, like they might have a lab that's more focused on aircraft design as well. Is that Georgia Tech has a very industrial nature as an institution, and it's kind of been
Yep.
embedded
Yep.
in Georgia Tech since the beginning. So, you can have institutes of technology, you can even have supposedly like, you can have prestigious engineering programs, but an institution that's very much has always been kind of focused on industry. And I've been someone that's always been headed towards industry. I never wanted to get my PhD and go into academia. It's not to say that I wouldn't one day look for an opportunity in academia as a professor of practice, or maybe I change my mind 10 years from now and say I think I want to go in academia. But I think kind of that industrial nature, knowing that everything's about practicality, like we're working on this because there's someone funding it from industry that's actively interested in it right now.
Yeah.
That was something that was big for me, and my advisor's been great. I also think that I did work at Georgia Tech while I was an undergrad, summer 2019. I had a summer opportunity here, and that was an exceptional experience because I think you can take like college visits, a 1 day visit, 2 day visit, things like that. But being somewhere 10 weeks, you see the good, the bad,
Mm.
the ugly. You get to know
Hmm.
students that are there full time. You get to know professors in multiple departments. You really just kind of get to see how things work. And I really had an exceptional experience here. Um, love the city as well. Love the surrounding environment. Atlanta is very black, of course, so it's like it's like a lot of black people here, a lot of black things happening here, a lot of black events happening here. That's something else that definitely attracted me, as well as few statistics. Georgia Tech's number one in terms of graduating black people with PhDs in engineering. And I'm like, hey, like I'm a black person trying to get a
Yeah.
PhD in engineering. That's a pretty good track record. And I'm not saying that like being a black student here is easy. It's not. But everything that I experienced kind of coming in and all the promises that were made to me, uh, they've been upheld.
Mm.
Like we have a Center for Engineering Education and Diversity that actually got tapped into when I was an intern here, and I'm still very much tapped into that division on campus. Go there often, have a lot of contacts there. Even in a position now where I get to mentor early career graduate students that are minorities pursuing aerospace or pursuing other types of engineering, and I would say that that center is spectacular and the work that they do, and there's a lot of students that can really speak to that. So those are kind of all the different things and a big mix that attracted me to Georgia Tech, and I think it's been a wonderful experience so far. I am, of
Mhm.
course, like get to a certain point, it's like all right, thinking about graduation, thinking about getting out
Yeah.
of here.
Yeah.
So there's a time for everything, but I've enjoyed it. I've met some incredible people. The engineering program here, of course, is very large, so you meet so many amazing people from all over the world, and that's always inspiring for me to like come across someone that's the exact age as you that maybe grew up speaking a different language than you, but you realize that when you were 8 loving airplanes, they were 8 loving
Yeah.
airplanes somewhere else totally different in the world. And man, it's so many incredibly smart people in the world. And I think to just kind of be in that environment allows you to first not be afraid of other smart people. Because I've actually met a
Hmm.
lot of people that, get more like imposter syndrome. They get more intimidated by that. But I think I absolutely love it because it's like, you know, you're in the room with supposedly the best of the best. And if you can all push each other, then you can go on whatever direction you want to go in life and know that you'll be successful. So I think all of those kind of things led into my decision to come here and have led me to where I'm at now.
Yeah. Oh man, sounds like George Tech honestly just checked off all the boxes for you.
For me personally, yeah, definitely. And it doesn't hurt that it's not far from home.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
I tell people this, one of the weird things about COVID, and COVID was a very negative experience. Um, what ended up working out for me being on the hybrid schedule my first year of graduate school, and I wouldn't have known this, at the time, was that was actually the last year of my grandmother's life.
Mm.
And my ability to be flexible, just a car ride back and forth, and to work on presentations, to work on schoolwork, beside her, and to just be there is something, as I mentioned earlier, I wouldn't trade. And it was very convenient that I wasn't a plane ride away. I was
Mm.
just a little drive away, and I made that drive many times, and I continue to make it like a lot, but uh, that also just happened to work out.
Yeah, that's one of those non-negotiables that you were talking about earlier, like being
Mhm.
able to go somewhere that does everything for you academically or maybe professionally, but also gives you that ability to have that space to come back home whenever you need to, or be able to get that free time away from school if you need to, different things of that nature. So that's definitely key, and I understand it a lot more now because I was definitely trying to get out of state for undergrad. I was trying my hardest. Like
Yeah.
Georgia Tech was on my list, Vanderbilt was on my list,
Hmm.
Alabama, University of Alabama was on my list. But like the way things played themselves out and everything, I just found myself really thinking back, like, man, like I made the right decision. Like the way everything lined up engineering wise, and for me to be able to stay at home and be around family still too, it helped a
Hmm.
lot. And I just found myself praying in different moments, like I'm actually glad I'm here still versus being out of state where I might have been feeling a little bit alone sometimes or not being able to get back home as much as I wanted to. And I was like, man, like the Lord knew what he was doing back when I was trying to
Definitely.
graduate high school. So it's, it's big for me
Definitely.
now.
I think more people should definitely take advantage of staying in state. Um, because I mean, financially it's obviously beneficial, but I
Yeah,
think
yeah, that too.
I think sometimes people at that age, we have different goals and we chase different things for different reasons, but I feel like it's more than being smart that matters in college,
Hmm.
right? Like it
Hmm.
doesn't matter how smart you are. Not everybody's built to grow up in Mississippi and
Yeah,
to go to college in Alaska,
yeah.
right? It doesn't. I don't care how intelligent you are.
Yeah.
It is still a change. You're 18, and
Hmm.
most have never moved. Your friends that you finished high school with are the same people you went to elementary school with. It's
Hmm.
just different, and I think that a lot of times people don't factor it in. Like it to go 2 hours away from home, like to go to Starkville, is
Yeah,
still something. And
yeah.
I'll say 4 hours and 6 hours and 8 and 10. It's like that's
It's a whole
another layer
other.
of
Yeah,
complexity.
yeah. It's definitely there's something I push more on younger people that I talk to now. It's like, hey, like there's nothing wrong with being here for a year, another 2 years or something. And you can still go off somewhere or whatnot, or just being here for undergrad and then graduate school somewhere. There's nothing wrong with it at all. So,
Hmm.
in terms of your dreams and goals and striving for them, what value do you place on having a solid family structure, like village around you?
Hmm. I think family structure. But just clarifying question real quick. I do need to plug in my laptop. When you say
Oh,
family
you're good.
structure, you're saying like the family you grew up in, or the family you create, or just both?
A little bit of both, honestly. Because I know actually, like once you do get into college, like being able to have a create that family environment around you is a big deal too.
Yeah. So, I'll start with like the home family thing. So I think that it definitely is a huge advantage having a solid family structure that you come from, and that can be however you define family. It can be biological
Mm-hmm.
family, it can be church family, it can just be hometown family. I think that definitely makes a big difference because on those days where like we all have these days where it's tough, there's
Mm-hmm.
days where you don't know like two things. You don't know if you're gonna get, you know, where you're trying to go, where you think you're trying to go. And then you're also some days like, dang, is it even worth it? Like,
Yeah.
whatever
Yeah.
I think I'm going towards. So it helps having kind of that extra motivation, that extra thing to lean on, whether it's being able to call someone, whether it's an actual family member or a friend, or being able to talk to someone. I think that always kind of help calm you, can help ground you. Uh, allow you to kind of just refocus your energy and get back. So I think that's hugely important. But what I will say is that unfortunately everybody doesn't naturally have that, right? So some people are not necessarily born into that, or
Mm-hmm.
they don't
Mm-hmm.
naturally come into that. So I think that regardless of where you come from, you can still always build what you know might fit you best, right? So it's like, hey, I grew up feeling like I lacked this, but thus I know I want it, or I know it might be needed, or it may be important. You can still find and create that. And
Yeah.
something for me is that I'm getting married next year, but my fiance, we've been dating since like high school and have known each other even since before then. Uh, and I would say, the amount of times that I had a big presentation and she's had to listen to it, or the amount of times that I was on the road heading to an internship and I've been on the phone with her or one of my other friends. Uh, that's a big part of being able to just kind of sustain this type of energy and to keep going. So I value that a lot in a career. Um, I want to be in a workplace where people respect the fact that I have a family that I care about.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
this career is not my identity and not my life. But at the same time, I want my career to be able to support my family in the best way too, right? I want to make sure I can provide well for my kids, anything that they want. That's something that's crucially important to me and something that I think in this next stage of life that's what I'm optimizing for.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I don't know if you have you at a point where you've thought deeply about family structure, building a family, and just what that means to you in terms of your career as well.
Oh, for sure. I've been thinking about family structure specifically and like the people around me since high school. Even speaking back on like Ferris Street and just extended family as well. Like it seemed like everybody was always trying to pour into me. Everybody was always doing their best to encourage me and tell me like, hey, the dreams and goals I have, like I can get there. Like if it's here in
Hmm.
Mississippi, I can do it. If it's outside of Mississippi, I can still do it. But just having those moments, like when you're saying, like some days after failing an exam or not doing so well on some homework or something, it's like, dang, like I don't know if I'm gonna make it or is it even worth it still? And it's like having talking to your parents or talking to somebody else where it's like, hey, like there's gonna be some bumps in the road, but like you can overcome that, or like you're actually making progress towards where you're gonna be. That was big for me. And so getting out of college and being in this environment still around a good bit of family and everything like that, and staying hold to those connections that I've made, especially my last 2 years in college, with the mentors that I have now, and being a part of the different organizations that I was a part of, and connecting with some of those people. Having that structure around me has been key because those are the people that I've been bouncing off ideas of. Those are the people that I've been telling, like, hey, like I can't wait for graduation because I know once I get to that next phase, like things are gonna be a little bit different. But I'm prepared for them, and I'm ready to actually succeed in those moments too. So it's been it's been something big for me, and even now, like figuring out the fact that hey, I do have like this creative side to myself that I really want to explore still. And so like getting
Hmm.
into the podcast and doing other things, because I really want to be a storyteller, and I realized that's something I've wanted to do my whole life. But I
Hmm.
felt like engineering was probably just the easiest way for me to get in the door sometimes, and so I'm
Yeah.
kind of using that to like set me up for things that I see doing later on down the road. Um, and so it's like having that ability to know like work is work. I have my personal life and everything, but I also have other aspects of my identity that I have to explore and be able to support myself and do different things of that. So it's been something big for me. But family wise, my own personal family, I do want it. It's just not something on my mind right now. um,
Understandable.
I feel like at this point, because I've been in relationships in college, but I feel like since I'm getting more centered now and I have a good grounding to myself, I can actually put
Mhm.
myself into those opportunities more. But I felt like for a little while, I wasn't really on the best track to be stable enough with it. And so, I mean,
Mhm.
everybody's journey is a little different. But I didn't have a high school sweetheart or anything that could help me stay along the way. But I enjoy the traveling that I've been doing, the journey that I've been on myself, and even now, like getting more into doing my personal things, like going out of the state a good bit of times. I want to get out the country at some point for my first time too, but knowing that all of that is like things that are going on in this phase, but like my next phase is things that I want to be able to appreciate more and have that family and do for my kids as well, and be able to share some of these experiences and stories for them, because I know that if I didn't do it, I would have that regret later on. And it's like I don't want to be able to live with regret. I want to be able to know that I optimized every opportunity that I had now, whether that's engineering or creatively or just doing something because I wanted to do it. So that's where I'm at basically.
Yeah, that's all really good to hear. I know you told me kind of what this was about. I was like, it's such a cool idea because I think anytime, not anytime, but a lot of times when I hear of podcasts or even see like clips on the internet, it's like a certain type of content,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's usually like a content that it has a lot of like click value.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of quick little viral moments and stuff, but it's never really positive. It's never really productive, conducive to anything good. It's just something that people will see, they'll react to, and it'll do exactly what it's probably created for, get a reaction. But with what you're working on here, I feel like is super commendable because it's like, all right, let's talk about something serious. Let's bring these voices that are from this particular area. Let's kind of
Mm-hmm.
highlight this because I think it definitely there's someone out there, right, that needs to see these stories that you talk about wanting to be able to share and to be able to tell. And it may just be one person, it
Yep.
may just be 10 people,
Mm-hmm.
right? But it's like the impact that you can have on just those 10 people is huge, right? Because that's, I mean, one person is a lot, but if you can do just 10, and then it, can of course be way more than that, it's huge because we're talking about a store of options here. There are so many
Yep.
options that are
Yep.
negative. We need some type of alternative. So that's super commendable.
I,
And I'm proud to be part of it, of course.
I appreciate that. Man. It's definitely been my motivation for a while. Like anytime I can do something positive, I'm gonna try my best to do it. So I feel like this podcast is the easiest way for me to do that.
Yeah.
All right, we're hitting the home stretch here. These are kind of a little bit of fun, thought-provoking questions. They can be kind of as quick, or you can put a little bit of thought into them, like I said. So the first one, what is one gift that you have that a lot of people don't know about?
Hmm. Gift that I have that a lot of people don't know about. Gift that I have that people don't know about. Ah, hmm. I think that maybe two things, and I'll just go off what maybe other people say that shocks them about me. I think one thing that, like you do things just to kind of get your mind off of school and career. Uh, Having a lot of friends that are international, soccer is like religion, it's like just what they do.
Mm-hmm.
Something that definitely shocked a lot of my friends. And I didn't play soccer or anything like that growing up. But you know, we would start doing those kind of activities and stuff. I think a lot of my friends that I've came across in grad school, well, I first came across when I got to grad school, that kind of knew me then, knew what we were working on and stuff like that. We were very shocked at like my speed or strength, that whatever. And it's like, well, growing up, this is most of what I did back in Mississippi. Um, Basically all I did pretty much growing up was this kind of stuff. So I know a lot of people are like, I didn't know, you know,
Mm.
you could jump that high or run like that, or you know, we may go to the gym and you know, why can you lift this? And it's like, well, just rewind maybe 10 years ago. This was basically all I did
Yeah. Yeah.
for a considerable amount of time in my life. And I also think that it's been I joke with, but my fiance uh is that people don't necessarily realize I used to play trombone in
Really?
um
Oh,
in middle school,
I did not know
and
that.
hey, it's always this is one of the things. So when I was in the eighth grade, they at Madison Middle School they picked one middle school band member to represent the middle school in like this high school all-state band competition.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
And
Yep.
basically they would take the best person at each instrument and whoever's first shared each instrument, and then they would select amongst those people, okay, who's the best person? So regardless of whether they play trombone or trumpet
Mm.
or clarinet, who do we feel is the best overall person to go represent the middle school in the high school competition? I guess they were limited; they could
Yeah.
only send one middle schooler to compete in the high school competition, and of course, they're still sending high schoolers as well. And I got fifth chair first band as an eighth grader with high schoolers, which if you're taking that competition to be like, okay, this is an exhaustive list of all the high schoolers that are supposed to be good at trombone. It's basically saying you're the fifth best trombonist as an
Basically.
eighth grader,
Yeah.
um, in compared to high schoolers. And I remember doing my tryout, and then we had like a practice. Um, and I remember when I had like a name tag on, all the people that I'm sitting around were shocked to see that I had middle school.
Mm.
And I was like looking back at that, I'm like, I think I was actually really, really good at trombone. I literally never played. I quit band right after that year. I went to ninth grade and did not want to be in band anymore. Uh, you know, it's like I don't. That year, I vividly remember in ninth grade was the first year of my life where I'm like, okay, this year I'm going to be doing sports year round. I'm going
Mm.
directly from football season to basketball season to two track seasons, and I'm like, I don't care to be in band anymore. And that was that. But I have a trophy at home for even just winning like band competition and stuff like that. But obviously, my brother does all the music stuff. But I don't think people necessarily realize that on trombone. I would say back then I was pretty good in middle school.
Man, I did not know that at all because I played trombone, and so I played all the
Cool.
way through from middle school to high school. Um,
Yeah.
I wish I would have took it probably a little bit more serious, but you know, I enjoyed my time and I loved everything about it. But I definitely did not know about the trombone thing.
Yeah,
Mm.
and it's so crazy because so you know, a trombone, you have like you start off uh say beginner, like you get a beginner trombone, and then you have like the trigger.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I had my parents. I really want a trigger trombone, and it's like, okay, if you want to get this one, that means you're really trying to take this seriously
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
play all the way through. Quit like a year later, and like when I told them that I wanted it, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna keep playing, and I just stopped. Um,
Yeah.
but trombone was a really really cool instrument. I know when they like gave you like the options in like sixth grade, that was like the one instrument that I'm like, this
Mm.
really seems like very very cool to just play. And believe it or not, at the church I went to today out here, um, they were having like a jazz festival and like seeing somebody
Oh.
play trombone. I was just
Mm.
thinking like, dang, I remember when I used to play trombone and some all the different positions you would do. So I miss playing a little bit, but you know, I'm not saying I would have been the world's greatest
Yeah.
trombonist or anything like
Yeah.
that. But in middle school, I humbly will say I was better than the other kids in band with me. But that was just a fun memory that I had. I really, really liked that instrument a lot.
Mm. Okay. For aspiring engineers pursuing their bachelors, Would you suggest an HBCU or PWI?
Oof. Um, I say this: if the HBCU option is available, and it's like viable. So for example, you mentioned going into chemical engineering. Uh, I'm pretty certain in Mississippi that Mississippi State's the only school that has chemical engineering, right?
They
So
did for a while. Ole Miss has it now, but
okay,
they just got accredited like a year ago. But it's a new
okay,
program basically. So Mississippi State was
cool.
the only one.
The only one.
Yeah.
So if that were a particular scenario, maybe you wouldn't necessarily be in a position where, like a Jackson State or someone else is an option, especially if you're also like looking to stay in state. But I do feel like when the option is there, I would strongly encourage people. I'm not telling people what they need to do and this is what you have to do with your life. I would strongly encourage to choose the historically black college option. I do think that there's a lot offered at HBCUs that it's more than just a degree. So I would strongly encourage that, and I would be willing to speak to anybody about that and the different advantages that come with it, as well as to um, kill any noise of maybe
Mm.
negative talk that may be associated with that decision. But I would strongly encourage it if the option is available to choose an HBCU.
All right. As you mentioned before, growing up in Madison and everything, you went to Madison Central High School, and I'm alumni there. Would you say that Madison Central or Ridgeland is the better school?
um, I'll say this: I went to so I had a friend who went to Madison Central with me, but his family ended up moving, and so his younger brother, which his two younger brothers, they ended up graduating from Ridgeland, and particularly his younger brother played a couple years at football at Madison Central, and then went to Ridgeland for his senior year. And I went to like I think their senior night or first playoff game and stuff like that. Um, his younger brother really, really enjoyed and loved his experience
Mm.
at Ridgeland, and there are reasons that he preferred Ridgeland High. So I'm not here to say that I'm not attached to anything. But Ridgeland, cool, Ridgeland.
Oh, I just wanted to have a little funny one, but
Yeah,
I'm
no,
glad you mentioned it
that's
on my podcast. But I went to Ridgeland High School, but yeah, so
yeah, yeah. I knew you went to Ridgeland, but
yeah,
yeah, okay, yeah. Maybe everybody doesn't know. Uh, but yeah, I really thought it was really cool, and I kind of got to see the
mm.
experience he was having and hear him talk about kind of differences he felt.
It's actually funny too because being at Ridgeland, I always kind of felt
Mhm.
like me and like a certain population, like a certain small percentage of the population of students there, we could have excelled at MC if we went to MC or whatnot. But it's just funny because it's something me and my siblings we talk about all the time. Like, man, I wonder how different it would have been if we were Jaguars instead of Titans or whatnot. But
Mhm. It's so funny because these schools are so close to each other.
yeah,
Like it's actually baffling just how close. Like we were playing Richmond in the like football jamboree. And you literally get on a bus to drive like 5 minutes and get
literally.
off the bus, and it's like you're right here. Um, but I just remember that being a funny experience. We never lost to Richmond in football, but um, later.
I was just
Uh,
my light that went out, but
oh, you're good. You're good. You're good. Yeah, I only got to ever compete against Ridgeland and Jamborees because they would basically take the two largest schools. And that time, maybe Germantown and Madison Central are largest now.
yeah, they
Uh,
are definitely.
but yeah, back then we would always play Ridgeland and the Jamborees, and you know, also with like little league sports. I mean, it's like the Madison Ridgeland League, so a lot of the kids that if you grow up like playing little league sports and like the Madison Ridgeland Youth Leagues, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of those kids you may play with end up going to Ridgeland anyways. Um, but yeah, I went to Madison Central. I'm not a Jaguar. Like I don't nothing like that.
No, honestly, since I left, I don't do much with Ridgeland. The fact that my youngest sister still goes there, she'll be a senior this year.
Oh, cool.
The fact that she still goes there is really the only reason why I have any connection with Ridgeland at this point. But
I think, some people like stay like at the high school they went to, and it's like for me, nah, I can't do
Can't do it.
it. Yeah, not at all.
If you owned a library, what kind of library would it be? A music library, a regular book library, or a movie slash TV show library?
Hmm. So the options were, did you say music, and then
Mm,
regular, and then like TV show, movie?
mm,
Hmm. This may sound like a basic answer. I might go for the regular library just
mm,
because of the wealth of options. Like you kind of get a broad range of options. Really funny story. I ended up sharing it actually at my grandma's funeral that me and John, when we used to stay at my grandma in the summers, there's like the Margaret Walker Alexander Library.
mm.
And my grandmother got us like library cards. This is just so like library cards in the summer. And we used to walk from her house. She was like, "Oh, we can go get exercise. We'll walk to the library." And the library wasn't that far. And I talked about kind of how that was a funny experience, kind of just my grandmother and her personality. But the way I spoke about it at her funeral is kind of like what that instilled in me
Mm,
at a young age, kind of like recognizing that literacy as well as education being something that was important, right? I didn't have to go figure this out or recognize like later in life. It's like at a young age, like we're walking to the library, you and your brother with your grandmother, and you're just, hey, literacy is important. And I think even going back to like our church connection, um, Fair Street is a church full of educators. Like
literally.
everybody has a
Literally.
tie to education. So I can also recognize how like growing up in a church like Fair Street contributes to, like the subtle stuff that you look and like,
Hmm.
yeah, it's really hard to go to the church and not realize that everybody worked at a school at some point. Um, yeah, so I'd maybe go regular just so you have kind of a broad range of options. Um, but that's not to take away from the other options.
Yeah. That's my option, honestly. I explained
That's,
it in one of my other episodes, but like having that was one of my things that I was always curious about in love too. Growing up was reading and just
yeah.
having access to like a library full of any and everything that I can read about. Like that would make me feel good inside, honestly.
I know you asked earlier something like a talent or skill or something I might have that people are shocked by. Something that's not a talent or skill that people are shocked by when they get to know me is that, man, to be honest, I do not like reading.
Mm.
Like, I, man, honest, my first time reading a book cover to cover by choice, not by force,
Yeah.
was my senior year of high school.
Oh wow. Yeah.
My senior year of high school. It was Invisible Man, Ralph Ellison.
Mm.
That was the very first time that I actually just read a book without being just forced.
Yeah.
And I'm saying this goes all the way back to summer reading books. Like I do not want to read this at all. I do not want to look at this. Um, and I'm still kind of that way today. That's one of my goals for this year is to like, read more kind of outside of school and not just read about like airplanes and stuff like that. But yeah, I am not a bookworm, not someone that just reads a lot. And I don't know what it is. Maybe I just never found the right stuff, or maybe just felt like I could sit still long enough.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, reading, hearing that you grew up like really just loving books, like, and I just always felt like this is brutal. Like I cannot sit through this. But that I should change that. I'll get better at that. I think it definitely is something I should get more into, and it will help me expand in other areas that I want to
Mm.
grow in. But no, at 26 years old, book reading is never anything I can say is like my hobby.
Yeah. All right, this is the last one. Do you have a certain level that you want to reach as an engineer and professional?
Yeah. Certain level that I want to reach. I'll say this. Uh, I think my goal and what drives me is I want to be an individual, not necessarily an engineer, but an individual that in the 21st century, when people look back and have to learn about what happened, my name has to come up
Mm,
for some contribution. And, it doesn't necessarily have to be aerospace,
yeah.
right? Like, that is kind of like that far reaching thing where it's like something that contributes something so valuable to the world that helps so many people, that inspires so many people to where it defines the 21st century.
Mm,
That would be my goal. But I've lately, well, not lately, I am studying engineering. I am also studying like business as well, but I don't necessarily just consider myself just an engineer.
yeah. Yeah.
Um, but that would be like my far-reaching goal. Probably. What about you?
It's similar to that.
Got you.
I've always felt like, even when I was a kid, I was like, I can change the world. Never knew what I was gonna do, but I always felt like I
Yeah.
could change the world. But kind of how you were saying, like when people look back, even like maybe talking to my grandkids or something, like when I was doing what I was doing for that significant period of time, I contributed to some level, some way, in a positive way that made things change for the better, basically. And so that's
Hmm.
one of my all time goals. Even in engineering, like I don't see myself working as an engineer professional for a long time, but I still want to have
Hmm.
some ties to it, whether that's mentoring or doing other little things, staying always active in it, reading more about it or whatnot. So even with that and being able to know that that's kind of where I got my roots from, but at the same time, like you were saying, like that's not the only thing that defines me. Speak more to the podcast name, but just knowing that I
Yeah.
can have an impact in multiple ways, that's what I want to do. And when it's all said and done, I want to be able to have my name be mentioned in some of those circles that like he did something impactful in some way, in some form.
Man, that's really, really cool. I'm sure we'll both do it. I guess it's
Yeah.
just a matter of time. I had a conversation with one of my classmates, and one of the biggest things I've noticed with people like that I meet in grad school is they come in and they start to see the gap between where they're at and maybe where they feel like other people are at. And then I ended up telling one of my closest friends, it's like the only gap between you and someone else is time.
Yep.
Like it's not ability. It's not like it's just time. Like that's all it is. You can't compare yourself to someone that worked for 10 years to come in here.
Mm-hmm.
You can't compare yourself to someone that's just from a totally different place, totally different environment than you are. So like it's just all a matter of time. So at this point, we have nothing but time to
Mm-hmm.
just go ahead and do the things that we just stated. And for some, it may happen when they're 22. For some, it may happen when they're 42. For some, it may happen when
Yep.
they're 62. But it's
Yeah.
like it's just a matter of time, really.
Yeah. Well, Jaylon, I definitely want to thank you for giving me some of your time today. I've been able to share some of your story and your experiences. I certainly appreciate it.
Man, I appreciate having this opportunity. Like I said, this is a very, very cool idea. It's a very, very cool mission. And of course, happy to participate, happy to keep up with it in the future as well on your other episodes. And
Yeah.
if there's any listeners of this that have other amazing stories to share, I mean, reach out to James. Let him know why you should uh, be on here and share your story because someone probably needs to hear it.
Yep. All right, this is more defined. I'll see y'all next time.
See ya.